What is going on, Rotogrinders? Welcome back to the NFL Pick Six Show here at Rotogrinders.com. Week number 11, fully in double digits. The usual suspects are here with us once again. Rich Hribar from Sharp Football Analysis, John Daigle from NBC Sports, and a Good Football Show podcast. Daigle, how are things in your world? How are things at Camp Silva?
Week 11, everything going well. Coming off a good, not great, but good 3 to 4x week. We talked about Kirk Cousins in depth and the Chargers injuries, despite them being a good secondary to that point, but just not having enough bodies. And, it took a couple luck. It took Cousins maybe not trying to throw to Tyler Conklin, but nonetheless finding Tyler Conklin for a couple touchdowns there. Also, Justin Jefferson getting there in a squeaky wheel week. So overall, a pretty good week. Also, something interesting I've noticed throughout the year and the sharpest year of DFS ever is that Mike Williams, we talked about him and he was an awesome tournament play. What is happening this year though, even in like mid and high stakes, is that Keenan Allen, who obviously was the better play, and we called Mike Williams the better tournament play because he's supposed to be less rostered, was literally 15 to 20% more rostered. Thus, Mike Williams was not the better tournament play at all. Keenan Allen was both the better play and the better tournament play, and it just seems to be like we're outsmarting ourselves for cash plays because we're just forgetting about them, thinking we should look for these sharper, thinner options. And that's something that just another thing I noticed last week.
Right before he went on air, I saw somebody on Twitter, I wish I can give him the credit for, but giving a note basically talking about Mike Williams, his deep ball is just not happening anymore. I'm not really sure why, if it's a small sample. Do you have a take on that? Are you aware of that? Or is that small sample nonsense? Or they're not throwing him deep balls anymore for whatever reason?
Well, it was supposed to happen last week and it did not, so I have no take beyond that.
We'll talk about the Vikings on the show, but I mean, when you look at Herbert right now, I mean he's 33rd now in the NFL on percentage of throws, 20 yards or further downfield. He's a guy that you would project to maybe have a lower ADOT than some quarterbacks, and naturally because two of his top targets are Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler, guys who are going to operate in that kind of area of the field. But when you look at it from a structure stance, you have kind of a couple of big tells. Like one is ADOT, using play action is, below league average. Then you look at last week, his ADOT from a clean pocket was 4.8 yards. Like that's structure. That's not, that's play design. That's not him. From a clean pocket, his depth of target was under 5 yards. He didn't throw one pass over 20 yards downfield last week against the Vikings, who that's like literally the way to beat the Vikings is to throw downfield. It was an odd game plan, and his season-long, sample is very low. The only quarterbacks that throw further amount of their passes on deep balls are Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan, and Daniel Jones, even though Justin Herbert, when he does throw downfield, is awesome at it. So, there you have it. So
I thought the Chargers were sharp. I was told they're sharp. They like still want to go for it in fourth down, which I appreciate.
They've had injuries, the right guard and right tackle. But I mean, even when they run play action, all it is like a play action, like pass to like Keenan Allen or like one of the tight ends in the flat. That's like 3 yards downfield. And then it's like 2nd and 7. And it's like, cool. You throw a 3-yard pass on play action. Like, it's been gross. It's been really gross. But here we are, man. Here we are. Look at us.
That is the chunk of our Chargers analysis because, we focus on the main slate here. Chargers do play Sunday night, so we're not going to talk about them so much. Pittsburgh Chargers, not talking about that game. Monday night, we're not talking about the Giants or Tampa. Thursday, no Pats or Falcons. And, of course, Denver and the Rams are on bye. We focus on the main slate, how this goes down. If this is your first time here at Week 11, where have you guys been? 3 main games. We're going to talk about 3 games from every possible angle. Then we're going to kind of run it back, our favorite plays at each position, and, players and games that we did not focus on just yet. The 3 games, well, I mean, Daigle, this is like, this couldn't hide, right? This game is, the sore thumb, whatever you want to call it. The 3 games we're focusing on, you picked the Dallas-Kansas City game. Kansas City, 2.5-point favorite here, 56 total we're looking at. It's clearly the most obvious, game jumping off the board. as far as total, as far as skills position players, as far as DFS. We can't ignore it. We got to talk about it. Do you have a general thought before we kind of fully dive in on this Dallas Kansas City game?
Overall, not really. It seems like another week, honestly, where you will have options to pivot for running backs at similar prices. And so if it gets log jammed on a couple players that are going to be highly touted, probably even on this show, there are terrific pivots as we wait for injury reports. Other than that, though, I've been looking at quarterbacks as well. There's a lot of bad quarterbacks that have good matchups this week. And, everyone's going to be focused pretty much on Dak and Mahomes more so than even Lamar, who I think everyone will expect to play down against the Bears. So it's an interesting spot at the top, thinking maybe you can get away with a cheapy quarterback as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I ran my optimals before the show. This is kind of generally the case as always. On FanDuel, you're just the way the salaries work, the way the structure works. You spend up on a quarterback on FanDuel, and on DK right now, a couple of quarterbacks we'll talk about later on. The cheapies that are popping for us in the models are
Cam Newton.
Yeah, Cam Newton, which that's going to be a fun conversation, and Derek Carr. Derek Carr's a 5.9 on DK, 7.2 on FanDuel, and and obviously we're recording this on a Wednesday night, and things change, and guys get ruled out, and all of a sudden value opens up, and you don't necessarily have to consider Cam Newton in cash in the year 2021, but that's what we're seeing on a Wednesday night. I don't feel comfortable about it. We'll have that conversation. But Rich, I imagine you're comfortable with both quarterbacks in the Dallas Kansas City game.
Yeah, I will talk about that game. Think about something that Daigle talked about too about Mike Williams and where he ended up getting is that, you forget during the week, man, like everyone is looking at all the same stuff that we're looking at. No one has like a skeleton key, and you end up, and if you listen to you figure people that consume this show or consume it's a show that's Evans are on or whatever your favorite DFS show is, if you consume multiple of them, you'll start to hear that name be brought up on each show, and it just it'll just kind of bleed into you. And by the end of the week, these guys are super highly owned. I mean, we knew Mike Evans was going to be super highly owned too, and he's another guy that should never be 40 or 50% in any tournament. And he's the same archetype of receiver, right? And he almost didn't get there too. He almost completely busted. I mean, you have to remember that during the week, it's Wednesday. You're going to hear some of these names brought up millions of times, and you have to always go back and circle back on Sunday morning, even Saturday night when you're going to do your primary builds and kind of see exactly where these guys are really looking at projected ownership.
Same thing happened with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin too. Evans came in 30 to 35% higher roster than Godwin, even though we knew it was a good spot for Godwin, and Evans only scored 1.5 points more. So it still made Godwin the better option, especially for larger field tournaments. Since he was $200 more, it was just obvious everyone was going to go Evans over him. So little scenarios like that. There's probably a better name than teammate pivot. I'm trying to think of something catchy. Rich is usually better at that than myself, but we'll think of something because the teammate pivot has been pretty popular this year, just to get off the one option that everyone is looking at and just go to the other player.
Rich, you got anything on the fly?
Off the top of my head, I feel like we got to have some kind of it's got to be some kind of sibling correlation or something like that. We'll work on it.
We'll work on it.
Maybe the chat.
Taking suggestions, chat. Go in the chat.
There you go. What's up, chat? We sometimes you don't acknowledge them. Let's acknowledge them this week. What up, chat? Do subscribe, turn on notifications. Most people listen to this show on the rewind, on the playback, Wednesday night, Thursday morning, whenever, Friday, whatever it may be. But some of y'all watch and hang out with us live. We do appreciate that. And if you give us a good name, we'll keep an eye on that. Not only is that Dallas Kansas City game the highest total on the board, but the other part of it is that, two powerhouse offenses. It's also projected at the most actual plays in the game, 131.7 according to Derek Carty's blitz game level factors. It all sort of correlates. Rich, well, I'm going to put it to you right now, Rich. Do you want Dak or do you want Mahomes? Right from the get. They're both great, obviously. It's who do you want to start with?
This game is ultra hard to stack. It's I've really tried to build some lineups around it, and it's hard. To play all the pieces you want, everyone's expensive. There's two cheap dudes, and it's Byron Pringle and Michael Gallup. Everyone else is expensive. But everyone else is expensive. So if you're gonna play these guys, you're gonna try to stack this game. We're gonna need some interesting pivots, man. You guys to build out your lineup, and we don't have it. It's not like last week, right? We don't. Maybe something will materialize later in the week. But, it's not like last week where we're getting all these, free chalky, 5 to 6K running backs on both sites. We'll see what develops later in the week. But, Dearness Johnson bumped all the way up if something happens to Nick Chubb. Mark Ingram bumped up. He wasn't bumped up completely on FanDuel, but that might still exist. But we don't have it like last week. Last week was a one-off. We've had one of those in 10 weeks. This week we don't have a lot of real dirt cheap running backs. Even like Myles Gaskin is relatively expensive. Like it's going to be tough to build lineups around this Chiefs Cowboys game.
I do not want to play Myles Gaskin. Like, I understand you're supposed to play running backs against the Jets. And
right. I never do because look at just 2 weeks ago when they played the Texans. He had to suck out to get there. See, anytime you start with the analysis of a team's opponent before you even talk about the player, it's always a big red flag for me. Like the Dolphins haven't run the ball well on anybody all year, but we're excited because we always want to play running backs against the Jets. We did that, like I said, 2 weeks ago when they played the Texans and he got that touchdown, but like they were objectively terrible running the football in that game too. A team that's right below the Houston Texans in EPA per rush attempt allowed. So like it's tough. But how are we going to fit in? How are we going to fit in Dak Prescott plus CeeDee Lamb plus Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes plus Tyreek Hill plus Ezekiel Elliott? Like it's not. There's a salary cap this week, man. There's a salary cap.
Yeah, it's so weird because you speak of nature of the slate, and like last week, running backs 4, 5, 6, and 7 as far as their options. Like any one of those would be like it's the best option this week. Probably not because AJ Dillon is but he's priced up to some degree. Dillon's probably like the first piece you put in for cash games this week. We'll talk about him soon enough, obviously, but yeah, guys that were rejected with massive volume. You mentioned Ingram last week. Even like Connor is now kind of priced up a little bit more to some degree. It's just not the same. It's a totally different build. But let's pretend like we do have some money, at least some money to spend, some salary. Well, how about this, Rich? Just tell me why do we want to spend money in theory? Why do we want these guys in our lineup?
In theory.
Well, they're all really good fantasy football players. First, though, you should always want to just play the best plays if you can make it happen. This game too, it's I don't want to just completely say like the Chiefs are back and go on this thing like we're going to be like juggernauts the rest of the season. But they were close in a couple of these games. Like they've been calling games the way they should. They've just left some plays on the field. Obviously, everyone will, and even the broadcast was doing it during the game on Sunday night, highlighting how much cover 3 the Raiders were running. But the Chiefs they've been a really good offense all year outside of like the subset of 3 games in an NFL season, which is inherently a small sample to begin with. And it's not like teams just started running 2 high safeties against them this season. It happened all last year too. They inherently just weren't making a lot of plays. The offensive line wasn't playing well. They were turning the ball over. Guess what happens when you start to convert some of those plays or you catch some of those 50-50 balls when Darrell Williams comes down with a jump ball? Those are plays that they weren't making over that stretch. So when those plays start to get made, that's how you end up racking up, 40 points and having a season high game for Patrick Mahomes. This game is particularly interesting because the Cowboys, they're not a team that really has the personnel to kind of really go too high and defend with their linebackers and safeties. None of those guys are good in coverage. So it's going to be interesting what they do. They play a lot of man coverage. Dan Quinn's kind of adapted to what he's had to work with. So what do the Cowboys do? They're not going to line up and play man coverage. That's not going to happen either. So, it's kind of one of those things we don't really know what they're going to kind of, come out and do. And there's going to be plays we made. It's not like Dallas has been a defense that we've been scared of at any point this season. When they have a high turnover variance, they look really good. And when they don't get turnovers, they look really bad because they give up a ton of yards per play. And that leads to giving up a lot of points. Even with them completely nuking Matt Ryan, they're still 22nd in yards allowed per pass attempt. They're still 26 in yards allowed per completion. They're going to give up chunk plays. I'm not really scared about anything that Dallas can really kind of acquiesce and kind of alter their personnel do. So they want to do some of the things that have been good against the Chiefs. I don't really think that their players are that good enough to do it.
Daigle, jump in here.
Well, for the Chiefs skill players, you know where to go because let's just go to ancillary options. Let's say you have the idea to stack the third receiver, but the issue is even the Chiefs don't know who their third receiver is. Byron Pringle was the latest victim to run the second most routes among their wide receivers, but Josh Gordon also got the start, as Josh Gordon has for 3 games in a row now. The issue is it's Josh Gordon at this stage of his career, so he hasn't earned more than 1 target in any game. He just can't. And so really it leaves us with 2 options, as it always does. It is Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Since the FBI was called in to investigate a murder in Nashville in week 7 at Nissan Stadium, Tyreek Hill has been peppered with 13 targets per game, pretty much just getting in the ball, whether it's from the slot or on the boundary, near the line of scrimmage, just everywhere. Also double-digit targets in 6 of his last 7 games. Travis Kelce it's it is being overblown how he has fallen off a cliff. The margin in which he has outscored his position is significantly thinner. Like last year, 3.5 points per game separated him from Darren Waller as the tight end 1 and tight end 2. And that took Waller going on a Cooper Kupp-like tear over the last month of the season to even cut it that close. Whereas 3.5 points per game at tight end this year is the difference from Kelsey as number 1 and George Kittle as tight end 5. On the season, though, Kelsey's floor is still being the best tight end in all of fantasy. 18 more targets than Darren Waller and 14 catches and 150 more receiving yards than Mark Andrews, who is currently the tight end 2. So overall, like Kelsey's still far and away the best option in his position. I understand it's a slate. It's a 1-game slate. A 1-week slate we're working with. So you can still like look to pay down, especially if you're struggling to fit one. And maybe you even only have an opportunity to get one or the other. If that's the case, I still lean Tyreek Hill since his floor, for all the reasons mentioned, is significantly higher. And although he's being peppered underneath and hasn't reached 100 yards and hasn't gotten that bonus in 3 consecutive games, it's just the targets and the yak capabilities. If they even try to match him on Trevon Diggs, or if they don't, it's still Tyreek Hill with double-digit targets. And so that's something that clearly I would be interested in.
Yeah, you're talking about a dude that can like score 40. Like Travis Kelce could be awesome at his price and completely wipe the tight end field away. But like you're talking about a guy that can get you literally 40 to 50 points at his apex, in Tyreek Hill.
The best argument for Kelsey over Hill is the lineup construction and that he knocks out the tight end position. That's the best argument you can make. Straight up, like if positions didn't matter, you take Hill. Well, I just noticed Gordon played 43% of the snaps last week, and that, I mean, I had no idea he was even on the field. Like that is the classic.
You can't get open on anybody.
That is the exercising, right? I suppose that's your classic hashtag exercising. What about the Dallas side?
He's very much Brian Edwards. He looks awesome on the field because he's so much bigger than everyone else. And
they fool David Boston.
And then you watch him play football and you're like, oh no, this is not going well.
We're dating ourselves throwing out David Boston, but he was like, that dude was like,
well, he got so big, he just couldn't move. Like,
yes, he looked like a guy that you did not want to mess with in the field. He looked awesome.
He was like, he may have been the first receiver on the body issue of ESPN. Like I recall him in jeans, like Favre Wranglers on the cover of ESPN. And like, he looked like a lumberjack, but that dude was actually just a receiver for the Cardinals at one point.
Yeah.
They just did coke and worked out, just got jacked.
Is that what that was? That's the remedy. So Rich, break down the receiving options for Dallas. As a general rule, I just kind of lean for Lamb over Cooper. Of course, you want to save some salary, you can go to Gallup. You can always throw Schultz in the conversation too. But like, as far as the way Kansas City defends, or I'm using air quotes with that, right? Is their defense, who is the best option here? Lamb, Cooper, Gallup, or are we just throwing darts?
Yeah, I mean, they're another team that likes to blitz a lot too, so they're going to put, any type of these guys in man coverage. I mean, CeeDee Lamb has absolutely obliterated man coverage this entire season. Saw it last week. That's, the Falcons are typically more of a cover 2 based team, but they tried to dial up some blitzes and they got schooled. He now has all of his touchdowns are against man coverage, CeeDee Lamb. On the season. So if you're going to get, one of these spags dialing up some heat, he's been kind of the foxhole blitz guy. He did play a season of 42% of snaps. There was a blowout. He got nicked up in that game. But also if you go back to like week 1, 2, when Gallup has been active, those two guys have kind of shared some routes run. It obviously didn't hurt, Lamb in the box score at all, but they didn't actually run nearly as much 11 personnel as all of us kind of thought that they would with Blake Jarwin out. They still ran a ton of 12 personnel, even in the first half of that game. It wasn't like they ran it in the blowout too. They were still, basically a 40% 12 personnel team in the first half of that Falcons game as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how the snaps kind of get divvied up and who gets out. Amari Cooper was the guy that wasn't squeezed in either of the weeks, week 1 or week 2, but he's also just been the most volatile guy. He's the hardest guy to kind of nail, and like everyone keeps chasing him. But he's kind of just given us he's like kind of Cowboys Tyler Lockett. Like he's going to get you like a couple games where he gets you like 35, and he's going to have like a 5-game stretch where he catches 3 passes. And you're like, what the hell? I'm going to get the flop lag on this. And you keep chasing the flop lag on it, and it doesn't happen. And then you finally get off, and he gets another 35-point game. It's very hard to diagnose when Amari Cooper is going to go off. There's like really no great signal. And the Chiefs are typically pretty decent against wide receivers because teams just hand the ball off against them. But yeah, if they're going to stay in a bunch of man coverage, I would lean towards Lamb too. But again, salary cap, who's the most expensive guy? CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. Gallup played 53% of the snaps, but like you said, the fourth quarter they were playing Malik Turner and Noah Brown. They've been there about 30% snaps. Lamb only 42%, but what can you really take out of this outside of because there's only so much you can take away because the game was such a blowout. They walloped them.
And not only that, but also Justin being Gallup's first game off injured reserve. Last year, he only dipped below 80% snaps in 2 games all season. And so we expect his role to increase. Justin being healthier in his second game, especially if it stays competitive throughout. So there are just a lot of whack-a-mole options here if you want to get off one particular player in the Cowboys passing attack.
Daigle, what about Zeke? Why not just do that?
Yeah, why not? I wish DK would have left him at 7K, of course. But nonetheless, we're seeing the touchdown regression happen from not getting there last year. And although we split carries, 50% of the backfield touches with Tony Pollard, split touches 50% both ways in that blowout game, it was still Zeke's backfield. We talked about this last week. Out of their bye, Zeke had handled at least 71% of their backfield touches in consecutive games before this one, where they could just alleviate him, give him some rest, and let Pollard run in the fourth quarter. I imagine Zeke is a player that maybe not many will get on because the last 3 games, he has looked worse on film. We did this in week 1 against the Bucs as well, and he was fine afterwards. But I imagine everyone would try to get on, in particular, CeeDee Lamb first, and then Amari Cooper. Lamb in particular, since he did get stuck in the slot for a season high 70% of his routes, and that's where he had 2 touchdowns and 40 yards from in that game.
8-5 for Zeke on FanDuel, 7-7 on DK. Hribar, you got anything as far as Zeke? Anything else you want to say as far as this game?
Well, I mean, I guess, Zeke. So Zeke in general is why you would maybe lean toward just the Mahomes side for, ceiling because, 80% of the Kansas City offensive touchdowns are passing and only 67% of the Cowboys are passing, right? That'd be your tiebreaker because Zeke Elliott exists, to run in some touchdowns. I mean, obviously it's hard for Dak to get the 5 passing touchdown game. He can get it. He's definitely capable of getting it, but, Mahomes has way more, outs to get there because the Chiefs, when they get inside the 10, they do a bunch of goofy stuff and don't really run traditional run plays. And we'll have to wait and see if, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be active in this game too. Because, I imagine a lot of people want to chase Darrell Williams if it's just him. Obviously if Clyde Edwards-Helaire plays, it throws a little bit of a wrinkle in things. I mean, we're in this weird area too, where people have are starting to just dunk on Clyde Edwards-Helaire like he's the worst player to ever play football because he was an overdrafted player and never really has lived up to the fantasy promise. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire is 3 times as good as a runner as Darrell Williams has been. And the proof is in every single metric. Darrell Williams has been really good in short yardage and, catching the football. But in terms of actually running the football, Darrell Williams has actually played a part in why they really weren't doing, having as much offensive efficiency during this lull than if they would have had a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire against light boxes is averaging over 5 yards per carry. Darrell Williams, 3.7 yards per carry. Darrell Williams has negative 73 rushing yards below expectation. He's a guy that's going to get what's blocked and maybe that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is definitely not, Edger and James or throwback Jamal Charles, but he's a baseline runner that is and was playing adequately in that role. But it's weird that he's the ire of everybody's fantasy scoring for some reason. He's the most popular guy to just dunk on. I think when Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes back, and if he did come back in this game against the Cowboys defense that is awful against the run, I think you would see them add a different dimension to this team. Now, does that make either of those running backs playable? No, but I think it would make the Chiefs offense a lot better than people seem to think it won't be, instead of just giving, Darrell Williams 20 carries, for 3.5 yards a carry.
And we have to see if it's Darrell Williams earning these targets or these concerted plays, but the Chiefs have thrown 24 running back targets in their last 3 games following that Titans blowout. I would think that is a concerted approach to just find that third receiver and another option underneath, since every team, again, they're the Kansas City 2 highs. Every team's just throwing safeties at the top and saying, we dare you to beat us underneath. And so, of course, if CEH is out, Darrell Williams becomes, in my opinion, on DraftKings in particular, an awesome play. But even if CEH comes back, we then have to follow some news tea leaves here and see if he's going to be used even a 50% share, or if we can still sneak on to Darrell Williams.
Yeah, I was trying to see if we get a discount of some sort. Not so much. CEH 6-3 on FanDuel, 5-2 on DK. And I just feel the whole situation will be mucked up. I can't imagine rostering any of the running backs. Unless we hear somebody's going to be the clear, bell cow or whatever. We're probably not going to hear that. I don't know. That's just sort of my
you just need him to be inactive. That's really it.
Well, yeah, they're inactive. Then all of a sudden it's interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Because we talk about cheap pieces. Like I said, there's the Kansas City wide receiver 3, whoever you want to throw the dart at, and then Michael Gallup, and then maybe Darrell Williams if you can get it. But other than that, everyone's expensive.
And if we get 75%, snaps from Gallup, like that's hot. I don't know what the production is, but that's still hot.
And we still have Dalton Schultz out here, getting cardio. He was never going to hold that target share he had like early in the season. I remember I had Sam Hoppin on my podcast, and we were just both talking about like, there's no way that he's going to continue to double CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper in targets just based on a talent perspective, right? Like that's going to even out. And we've seen that, basically, the past 4 weeks, he's only had a 12% target share. And we've seen the ball get to these playmakers that are just better playmakers, but he's still on the field a ton in an offense that we want attachment to. And people probably want to stop chasing that. I mean, the Chiefs did, limit Darren Waller in that game. I know he had a touchdown called back because they cheated, but they've still been awful against tight ends. So, I mean, Dalton Schultz still is an interesting guy out there, at least to get unique and putting this game together.
There are other football games being played this week. One of them is Cincinnati at Vegas. 49.5 is the total. Vegas is getting 1 point. All right, Rich. I guess Derek Carr right now looks like a cash game potential quarterback on DK. And again, all this stuff shuffles up as the week progresses. But on a Wednesday night, to kind of make stuff work, we live in the world of a salary cap. We keep talking about that. Salary constraints, is Derek Carr 7-2 on FanDuel. And again, FanDuel, I kind of spend up on my quarterback, certainly my main lineup or my cash lineup. But on DK, to make stuff work, I think it's okay against Cincinnati.
Yeah, this game is particularly interesting, especially because it's a pivot game. It's a 4:00 game that no one is really going to care about because of just the cachet that the other game carries. Derek Carr keeps finding a way to get there. I mean, he keeps at 18 or more DraftKings points in 6 of 9 games this season. The loss of Henry Ruggs has been felt in this offense. I mean, Derek Carr's ADOT has gone from 9.3 yards, which was 6th in the league, to 6.9 yards. Without Henry Ruggs, which was 24th in the league. Still relatively small sample, but they just don't have anyone else that can run downfield except for the 7 snaps Deshaun Jackson's going to play, per game. Zay Jones doesn't get it done. Nobody's guarding Zay Jones. Nobody's respecting Zay Jones running any routes. But this also is the best defense objectively Derek Carr's faced all season on paper. So that's kind of interesting as well. So without, kind of that low ADOT and then facing a team that is, the Bengals are 7th in the league in passing points allowed per attempt. But the one thing that is just absolutely helping Derek Carr right now is the Raiders are just tremendously terrible at running the football. Like they are just awful. They're actually 30th in the NFL in EPA rushing the football. Even when they try to do it, they can't. And it's just led them to be forced to have to throw in these games and lean on Derek Carr. So Derek Carr is getting just like a ridiculous amount of volume. He's dropping back 42 times per game. That's 6th in the league. So you're getting a lot of pass volume too. So if the Bengals are still going to be a good defense and limit things on a per attempt basis, if you throw 45 attempts, the counting stats on the beginning there, and you get some value, like you said, as the cash game guy, because he's still getting there. Like last week, he still got there at the end of the day. So I think he's particularly interesting. Darren Waller looks pretty interesting as well. I wish he was a little bit cheaper on FanDuel than what he is, especially for that site. But the Bengals are another one of these teams that, they don't really have really good coverage linebackers. So there is opportunity here for, some plays for Waller and kind of just to go sneakily. I don't know if he'll sneakily go around because he'll probably be a guy that someone talks about all week anyways, but I do like Waller as well.
6-7 on FanDuel. That's okay. That's okay.
But it's only 600 lower than Kelsey.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up, by the way, you talked about it as far as the slate and how it sets up. And just we don't talk a ton of strategy and lineup construction and all that and kind of pivoting and all that, but the way the slate sets up, there are 3
late swap city.
Yeah, like the key game, like the big game that everybody's, it's Dallas KC at 4:00. Arizona Seattle is at least interesting, and we'll see what happens with the Murray situation. Of course, if Murray plays, that becomes more interesting. That game becomes more interesting, and same deal with the DeAndre Hopkins, and then there's the Cincinnati and the Raiders. So yeah, just delving into strategy, it should be an interesting week. Just like see how your guys are doing in the 1:00 games, and if they're doing well, stick with the chalk. If they're not doing well, maybe get off it, and hopefully some goofy things happen at 4:00. What do you have for Daigle as far as Carr and his options? So he's throwing the ball to?
You mentioned cardio earlier, and like Reeves hit on, that's absolutely Zay Jones, what has become leading the team in routes run in place of Henry Ruggs the past 2 games. But also, Deshaun Jackson showed up out of nowhere, ran just 5 routes, also with a fumble, had 1 catch for 38 yards, and those 38 yards were only 4 fewer than Zay Jones has recorded in place of Henry Ruggs the past 2 games. That's how bad he's been. I also we should expect Deshaun Jackson's role to increase, every single passing week, maybe in place of Zay Jones, maybe in place of Bryan Edwards, who knows? But I would still expect him to have a deeper role and in his snaps to grow and hopefully targets to grow in this game because he's still a tremendous deep threat option if they get him involved out there. That's practically it. Like Rich said, they can't run the ball. And more so, Kenyon Drake continues taking away touches. Now since the bye, at least 31% of the team's backfield touches, at least 6 touches in back-to-back games, mixing in with Josh Jacobs, who Rich Bisaccia is using more like an early down grinder, as he should, and getting Kenyon Drake sprinkling in on passing downs. That's where he's been more effective anyhow. And so, yeah, you pretty much know where to go. And Hunter Renfrow has at least 5 catches in every game this year, and Darren Waller underneath. And then maybe for larger field tournaments, that's when you start asking yourself, okay, how much of a role will Deshaun Jackson play? And that's when I'll sprinkle him in as a deep threat in any Joe Burrow runbacks.
Wow, I pulled it up last week, and Zay Jones, 85% of the snaps, previously 96% of the snaps. Djax just 17%. One memorable snap. You guys alluded to it, that fumble and whatever would happen before the fumble. That was a weird, fun play.
I mean, it's the same thing he was doing in Buffalo. Like a undrafted free agent, Robert Foster came in out of nowhere and just usurped him because Zay Jones was just not getting it done on the outside.
How about you also mentioned Renfrow. Renfrow is one of those like super safe kind of cash game plays. Like he's kind of just makes stuff work. And I don't want to put that tag on the other side as far as T. Higgins, but like if you look at his game log, and I like just game log watching, but I mean I'm sure you've noticed this as well too, Reeves. But every single week he's like fine, he's good, nothing incredible, nothing that's blowing your lineup up. He's always really, really good on DK as far as the price, his FanDuel prices, whatever. 6.5K, 5.4 on DK. Talk about Cincinnati and DK. Yeah, like 5.4.
He's been cheap on DK all year. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 2, but we know that he is kind of the end zone archetype. So that's eventually gonna, I think it's eventually gonna come around. He's another one of these guys that people are gonna keep chasing because all the peripherals are there. I mean, I think you'll see him highly owned at the end of the week. Extremely. He's one of those guys that makes these lineups work, right? To get the pieces that we talked about. He'll be, I think, extremely popular on both sites. I think where he fits in terms of salary on both sites. He also leads the Bengals in targets, catches, and air yards against cover 3. Everyone obviously wants to talk about the cover 3 and how much the Raiders ran. So if you're someone that likes that, you can put that, feather in your cap and kind of look at that. But he's just a guy that just fits. But don't ignore Jamar Chase either. Just because he finally just ran into some variance, right? Like he had run so pure the first 7 games of his career that he was eventually going to hit at least the wall, especially as a wide receiver. But even though he had 3 for 32 and 6 for 49, I mean, look at his targets still in those games. He has had 20% of the team targets in every game but one now this season. And he's another one of those guys that like we just talked about, like if he hits, he has the potential to hit for like 25 and 30, like a big time number. So like he's another guy too you don't want to ignore. So like obviously this game in general has a lot of upside to it, and you can run a lot of stacks. Obviously, if your 1 o'clock guys don't hit, and your little skinnies or your minis don't hit at 1, and you're sitting on Chiefs Cowboys like the rest of the field, you're gonna have to pivot and load up on this game.
And remember when Chase left us before the bye in that terrible Browns game we don't want to rehash for PTSD reasons, but 2 drops, 1 that was an end zone target he usually comes down with, also a fumble, even though he did have a season high 32.5% target share. So he's still left on a bad but good note behind the scenes.
Anybody have a thought as far as Joe Mixon?
Yeah, he's the tricky part of this game, right? Because Joe Mixon's tricky in general because he's gotten catches in like 3 of the past 4 games, but his routes run per dropback haven't moved at all. Just the targets have found him. So, but it feels like you're almost skating on thin ice with that, right? Like just the way the Bengals have operated, like he can easily just go and like have a 0 target game with the way they've run their offense. Cause that's like the key, like that's what's gotten him there, right? Like, he had been scoring touchdowns already, but now that he started to tack on 40 and 50 receiving yards. He's had over 40 receiving yards in, 3 of his past 4 games. When you add that to his workload and touchdown ability, that's what turns him into the alpha back we were all hoping we were inevitably going to see. But the routes run per dropback are still very mediocre. The Raiders are bad against the run. 4.6 yards per carry to running backs. That's 24th in the league. 14.2 rushing points per game to backfields is 21st. They're also bad against running backs in the passing game. We saw Darrell Williams light them up on Sunday night. He definitely is way too cheap on FanDuel. What is he on DraftKings? He's way too cheap on FanDuel though.
All right, so Joe Mixon's price this week, he's 7.6 on FanDuel and 7.6 on DK. And as the general rule, if you're the same price or cheaper on FanDuel, you're at kind of a discount on FanDuel. So
right, yeah. He's way too cheap on and he's better for FanDuel.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The only concern, even though I do think he's a really good play, depending on how you want to play this game, they're all great options, honestly. The only concern would be that between weeks 3 through 7, before he got injured, Chris Evans was out there for a route on 15% of Joe Burrow's dropbacks, mixing in behind Mixon and Smosh Pirine. 15% doesn't seem like much, but he was still taking away routes from Joe Mixon. And now the past 3 games, he's basically been injured. He was hampered by that hamstring injury, was out in week 8, but only ran 3 routes in week 7 and 9 before the bye. Now with the bye, 14 days rest, I expect him to be healthy. So I do just wonder if he's going to be balled enough to be annoying for Joe Mixon's passing game usage.
Is Tyler Boyd still in the player pool for us? He is pretty cheap. Hasn't been spectacular of late, obviously. Certainly fallen behind the other 2 receivers on his team. 4.8 on DK, 5.6 on FanDuel. He is the floor, $10 on Yahoo. Or is just, Daigle, do we have any thoughts as far as Boyd? It's hard,
maybe get there for the floor, but you're basically just seeing him usurped by superior talent, whether it be 21-year-old Des Bryant and Jamar Chase or a downfield prospect and threat like T. Higgins. Boyd has averaged just a 14% target share behind Chase's 26% and T. Higgins 23% in the 5 games since Higgins initially returned from injury. And we can't get off Higgins, let alone trying to play Tyler Boyd. Boyd in that span also has only had 1 top 42 finish in that 5-game stretch. So really just not even getting there as a floor play, honestly, right now.
Anything else this game, Reeves? Shall I move on to our 3rd game on the slate?
Well, I mean, I'll say one thing to talk about this game on the Joe Burrow side is to keep in mind the Raiders don't blitz. And, Burrow is one of these guys that's really funky splits against the blitz where he's absolutely just like destroyed teams. We saw the Browns said, we're going to get home with 4 and just play coverage. And granted, there was plays left on the field in that game. But Joe Burrow splits against the blitz and non-blitz. You're able to get home with 4. I mean, they're pretty jarring. He's thrown 8 interceptions against non-blitzes, which is pretty crazy. 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions against the blitz. We talk about that a lot. 11.5 yards per attempt. He eats it up when you come at him. And then 7.8 yards per attempt, 12 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. When teams are dropping back in coverage. So one thing to keep in mind, because the Raiders are not going to blitz. Like they're going to rely on Max Crosby and Ngakoue to get there. So we'll see kind of what happens, with Burrow. But I mean, it's not going to push me off of Burrow and stacks this game because I'm going to stack this game. But one thing just to kind of look at in his just kind of weird splits this season.
Burrow's 9.3 yards per attempt against cover 3 this year includes 3 drops as well. So his numbers actually should be significantly higher. I'm curious to see how and if he gets steamed by Sunday. I can't put my finger on it right now, but I'm curious to see if the field gets on him by Sunday.
And I presume if you're playing Burrow, you want to get up there as far as Chase, right? That's your favorite. And he's probably gonna be lower owned than Higgins just because of salary reasons. So assuming salary is not an issue and all that kind of stuff, you prefer Chase over Higgins. He's your favorite person to pair with Burrow. Is that a reasonable assumption?
King Chase. Yes, absolutely.
21-year-old Des Bryant is high praise, man. It's pretty big.
That's what he is.
Is that all he is 21?
He's only 21. He's very, very young. Yeah. He was a superstar at 20 at LSU.
3rd game on the slate, the Packers at Minnesota. 49 is the total. Minnesota's getting 2.5 points. That Packer offense, that Packers-Seattle game was such a massive disappointment last week. I guess we'll touch on Seattle a little bit later in the show. Green Bay did a little more than Seattle. They're in a dome this week at Minnesota. Got to love that this time of year. Let's start with the Green Bay side. Well, I mean, Reeves, Devontae Adams, we just kind of touched on it as far as Mixon. Same price on DK as his on FanDuel. Both places, like it's going to be chalk city. 8.4 on FanDuel, 8.4 on DK. like that's a really good play. And of course, decision points in tournaments. I assume you're going to agree. Like, yeah, play Devontae Adams in cash, if nothing else.
I mean, the most telling stat of the 2021 season is that Hunter Renfrow has more touchdowns than Devontae Adams. Just twisting a knife into our hearts. Devontae Adams just gets this. He's got this just elite target share, and we can't get him in the box, as much as we did last year. And that's just simple regression. Sometimes it pulls the wool over us way more than it should be in the NFL. I mean, Minnesota obviously has been beaten up by opposing lead wideouts. The thing about Minnesota is we talk about you want to beat them downfield. And that's where Aaron Rodgers has been really bad this season. Just outright terrible. I mean, he's 29th in the NFL in points allowed per points per pass attempt on throws 15 yards or further downfield, but he's second in the NFL on intermediate throws. He's just really struggled to connect on that deep ball, in these downfield targets, because Devontae Adams has a lot of games where he's got a lot of catches, but not a lot of yards or a lot of high yards per target and high yards per catch, because they're just not connecting on those long balls. This would be a good spot to do it as long as the Packers don't go Joe Lombardi. But we'll see what happens here, because, there's Dave Bakhtiari's still banged up. Minnesota's still getting home with 4. They got home on Herbert last week with just 4. They're another team that's going to rely on that. Obviously, Mike Zimmer's these teams are no strangers to each other too. And, Rodgers has had, cattywampus production against, the Zimmer defense. So this is kind of a weird spot, because this line is the over-under is 50. And Packers games are averaging 39.6 points per game combined. That's 31st in the NFL. Every Minnesota home game has gone under this season. The Packers also are on this super heater defensively, where they've stopped, Kyler, Mahomes, and then, whatever you want to discount for Russell Wilson the last 3 weeks. This is a weird one, man. This is a weird one, because the total feels like it's a few points too high.
I just Googled the word cattywampus. You just dropped cattywampus? What is that?
Yeah, like uneven,
I've never heard that before. That's
my grandma used to say that all the time.
Daigle, is it just me? Are you aware of cattywampus?
I think I've overlapped with Rich enough in the years where I've heard it, but only from him and Grandma Hribar.
That was not in my repertoire. It's not in my arsenal, but I want to borrow that. I stole the jogging thing from you. I want to steal that as well too. We got a buried lead as far as Dylan, like AJ Dillon.
Oh, yeah.
He's the first guy you throw in your lineup this week with the absence of Aaron Jones. The price is not high enough, and that's that. Daigle, feel free to give your thoughts as far as the Green Bay offense, and I assume you agree as far as Dylan. And despite, calves or no calves, he has those massive calves, doesn't even need them with that price and the usage that we're expecting.
Yeah, I hate when situations are like this, because it's just game theory, right? Like anything I say, you already know he's an awesome play. What do you want me to tell you? And so really, the first thing I thought of was not even if you play Dylan, it's can you get away in a game like we saw last week. For the Packers games, it always comes down to you need efficiency, because volume is just never going to be there for them or their opponents. That doesn't mean you can't play them. You can still get very efficient with Aaron Rodgers when he's healthy, with opponents when they're scoring on the Packers. You just need that. And so the first thing I asked myself was, can I play Adams and AJ Dillon, or is a situation where I need to play one or the other? And is Adams a good pivot off of AJ Dillon, trying to get the touchdown equity? So that's where I'm at more on a Wednesday, trying to figure out that situation, because it doesn't really seem like an environment I want to play both, when both are very good options. And so at AJ Dillon's price, maybe I look elsewhere for another running back to pivot to. And hopping quickly to the Viking side of the ball, let's go here, because, we're asking, well, if you want to play both, you need some pushback. And for the Packers, they were able to shut down Russell Wilson for many reasons. One, that he just wasn't good. Pro Football Focus charted him with the third most inaccurate passes of week 10. He only averaged 5.3 yards per attempt and 1 pick from a clean pocket last week. But the Packers also played with a front 6 rather than a front 7. They kept 6 or fewer defenders in the box on 97% of their deepest on their snaps. They posted their deepest defender on average 16 yards off the line of scrimmage, and basically told Pete Carroll and Russ, you better dink and run, because you ain't dunking at any point on us in this game. And so if they do that against the Vikings and keep this, 2-eye safety more or less just attempting or threatening the Vikings, you better throw underneath or run the ball. That's what the Vikings will do. And they will slow this game down. And then it becomes unlike last week, even though we said like everyone was going to get on Dalvin Cook, it was a good time to pivot to Kirk Cousins double stacks. Like this would be the week we want to be on Dalvin Cook because the matchup makes a lot of sense here for him.
Hey, that's Joe Barry, man. I mean, where'd Joe Barry come from? We've seen it. Brandon Staley, coached with Brandon Staley last year. That's what they want to do.
You mentioned slowing the game down. Besides Chicago and Baltimore, that's projected the slowest game of the week or the least amount of plays. Once again, 121.3. The Packers find themselves in a game that's going to be played pretty slowly. And that was an interesting thought you threw out there, Daigle, because like for sure, Dylan and Adams are going to be very, very popular paired on cash games. And maybe their ceiling is hindered to some degree. And maybe it's an interesting thought to move off at least one of them, just pick a side for tournaments.
That's where I'm at right now on a Wednesday. I think I want to play. God, this is my famous last words. I think I like Adams over Dylan, but again, that's going to probably ruin me. We'll see.
See, I feel a lot better about not playing Dylan this week if I had the collection of running backs we had last week. But the collection we have as of right now, this week, you know what I mean? The alternatives, it's like, okay, I'm going to fade the guy. What now? You have a follow-up question for who? And like the list is not nearly as appealing as it was last week. Doesn't mean he can't be beaten. Of course he can. It's football. Goofy things happen, a lot of variance, but just a thought. And yeah,
he's not as cheap as both those guys either. The three guys were once we got to Sunday, but when you have Dearness Johnson at 5'8" and 4'7", like there's absolutely no reason to fade that, at that price. Like, because if he scores a touchdown or he does like or even does what he did, like you're dead. You're dead. You can't if you fade that. It wasn't just he's 7K and he's the AJ Dillon's a little bit priced up a little bit compared to the other guys.
And it wasn't just Dearness, like Ingram and Dearness were paired up in the tourney winners and like the $9 slant and the $200 like single entry double spy. I don't know what the juke had at $1,500 entry, but like the chalk, those two running backs were the plays. And then everyone just mixed it up around them, whether it be Ramondre and Hunter Henry, like double stacks in that game at 2 to 4% rostered. Either way though, like, yeah, the chalk running backs, you had to have them in your lineup to win last week.
Do we like Conklin as a potential cheap tight end pivot here? I know he had a couple of touchdowns last week, not a ton of targets, but he's been pretty respectable of late. The price, I think, got bumped up a little bit. 3.9 now on DK, 5.5 on FanDuel. General rules on FanDuel. You probably can spend a little more on tight end. Of course, you don't have to. DK, you're generally spending down, but in tournaments you can get different and spend up. Reeves, what do you have for me as far as the man bun, Tyler Conklin? Is he still rocking this, or is this just like from his picture months ago? I don't know. He's always wearing a helmet, so I don't know if I've seen him without his helmet on.
Yeah, Tyler Conklin ruining the day of all the Dalvin Cook should have been touchdowns last week. I mean, the target share has just been a little cattywampus for him as well. He had the 21% and 25% the 2 weeks prior, 14% last week, but he gets there because he gets in the box twice. Packers, another team, they've been beat up by tight ends because they play the same style of defense. There's a reason why the teams like the Packers and the Chargers and the Eagles are so bad against tight ends. It's schematically, it's where passes get funneled to that defense. It's like when people used to always talk about how bad like the Falcons, defense was against running backs. And it's like, yeah, the whole defense is designed for you to throw underneath and let the linebackers come up and make plays. It's the whole point of it. But so yeah, he's in another just cherry. He's had just a run of cherry matchups for teams that are just bad like this, right? Like there you can pepper the middle of the field. But he's also one of those guys that like is a touchdown or bust guy, at least on FanDuel. He's fine on DraftKings because it's a totally different situation and game over there. Like Dan Arnold has been an absolute like stone nut play on DraftKings for like 3 weeks, but he's on FanDuel like that. He's not doing anything to like move the needle over there. But it's like, damn, are they going to price Dan Arnold yet up over on DraftKings? Like this dude's getting 8 targets a game.
Dan Arnold is, I think he's been priced up a little bit. Yeah, he's now 4-1 on DK, so he's crept into the 4s. Still 5-4.
It's also the situation we always talk about whenever we bring up the Vikings, in that Jefferson has been targeted on 52% of his offensive snaps against. Thielen has been targeted on 52% of his offensive snaps against zone coverage. More, albeit just slightly, than Justin Jefferson. And Thielen has only been targeted on 31% of snaps against man coverage. And the Packers run more zone concept. So it is one of those where Thielen could still sneak in here if you're looking for another player or just like a receiver from this game.
Like people generally just like playing Jefferson over Thielen, right? He's like the sexier play, is he not? And also,
because
he's just higher upside. He's also better.
Cooler. He's good. Yeah.
Is this the week MVS catches that long one? Is that going to happen? I don't know how to predict that. Can that happen this week? Maybe.
I mean, who's chasing that? Like, what's the objective sell? I mean, there's obviously
He's 3-7.
The Vikings are. I mean, if it's a vulnerability for the Vikings, like I said, Aaron Rodgers has been bad throwing the ball downfield, and maybe that just regresses. Obviously, we have a pretty large sample of Aaron Rodgers being good in his career and throws, further than 15 yards downfield. But yeah, the MVS game is there's a lot of magic men have tried to chase that one.
And I mean, he had one last week. Like he was due it. He got one last week. It didn't end up with a touchdown, but he had a long one that's pretty much all Rodgers completed throughout the game.
Yeah, I played him because he was so cheap and kind of made still. Well, whatever. No cares about last week. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I don't recall when I played him. Last week,
all runs together.
Yeah, salary wasn't really an issue last week, so it probably wasn't last week. Doesn't matter.
Maybe that's why it feels so different this week. We want to play all the expensive guys now.
We need Mark Ingram and Dearness Johnson back.
Oh boy.
Well, we don't. It'll make it more fun this week. Well, I mean, like, and you talk about too, like, how many people are just going to ignore playing the Bills against the Colts? Like a complete pass funnel defense. A team that's been awful against the pass has like supreme splits, and they play at 1. People aren't going to want to tie up those spots, and like they're in a destruction spot as well.
Well, that is a good segue to our position conversation. We'll talk about that just a second. Before we do that, we do want to talk about, give some love to the sponsor, Jock Market. Stop throwing your money away. It's time to check out Jock Market, the app where daily fantasy becomes a stock exchange. You buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money. Download now for a 100% deposit match up to $50. Use the promo code Grinders, GRINDERS. Now get this, if you do not turn a profit this week, Jock Market will cover your losses in your very first event. Download Jock Market in the app or Play stores, or check out jockmarket.com. That's JOCKMKT.com. Again, use the promo code Grinders, 100% deposit match up to $50 on your first deposit. And is that where you want to start, Reeves? Josh Allen versus the Colts. He can get there with the arms. Arms singular, I suppose, with his arm and the legs as well. We have Cam Newton. We kind of threw out there. He's fine. That's not a FanDuel play by any means. A 5-1 on DK. Man, Cam Newton. Oh boy. Lamar Jackson. He's sick right now, but I assume under the assumption he's going to be fine. Feels like he's been sick like multiple times this season. But Wednesday night, we're going to assume he's
not just this year. His career.
Is he always
like
sick?
does he just like hang out at like preschools and stuff? Like where just like germs are being passed around? Like they talked about during the game on Thursday. Like all he does is hang out and sleep. Like how's he getting sick so much?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, he does sleep a lot. I don't know what. I wouldn't think that would be a cause of it. But again, hopefully he's fine. Hopefully they're just being overly cautious there. But Reeves, yeah, you mentioned Allen. I want to at least talk about Cam Newton. We're assuming he's going to take over, be the lead guy there in Carolina versus Washington. That's a perfectly fine matchup. They lost their defensive leader and Young as well. Yeah, I don't want to play Cam Newton, but maybe, I don't know. Talk to me about some quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious to see like when we get to the end of the week, because I don't think Josh Allen, like he's just too good to like ever like come in probably like under-owned. But like maybe if teams are just like people are just waiting to kind of stack that game or have a pivot to go to Burrow or Carr, that maybe he just comes up maybe on more under-owned than he should be owned in this matchup, because I mean the Colts are number 2 in EPA against the run. They've been really great against the run. We know the Bills can't run. They did run better last week, obviously, against the Jets, and they mixed in a lot of play action last week off of that, which really helped Josh Allen. But again, it's the Jets. But the Colts, have been a pass defense we've literally targeted the entire season. Like Josh Johnson had a top 5 scoring week against them and didn't even start the game. Their 22nd in completion rate, 23rd in yards allowed per pass attempt. They've allowed a league high touchdown rate to opposing quarterbacks. So they're 31st in passing points per game. Like seems like an ideal spot for Josh Allen to be really good in. So, I mean, yeah, I'm excited for him. Obviously all the pass catchers, he's one of the cheapies in that game is, Emmanuel Sanders. He's one of the guys you can kind of get like some salary alleviation with. And you can run doubles with him as well, which that's always the fun thing about Josh Allen is you can always run doubles with him. It didn't get there last week. It was just all Diggs, but Diggs had his highest target share of the entire season. He almost had 50% of targets. That's not something that will really hold a lot of water week to week. We'll see these guys like Sanders and Beasley get targets. Other than that, I mean, we kind of talked about all the quarterbacks like I'm really honing in on. I think Cam, I don't really play on DraftKings, so like I'm not going to gravitate towards Cam. But 5-1, I think is fine for him against Washington. And see, they did play better last week defensively. They kind of have the personnel to kind of match up with Carolina. But yeah, like you said, no Montez Sweat, no Chase Young. It doesn't get any better if it's for Cam Newton if he's going to make his first start.
Oh boy. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's important to note, like, it's not a FanDuel play. I don't think it's in any way a FanDuel play, but for DK, it's kind of sort of somewhat interesting.
You can't really pay down on quarterback on FanDuel. It's tough.
It's hard. It's hard to make work for sure.
He's going to average a touchdown every 4.5 snaps. Easy game.
That's sustainable, you think?
Now, like Rich said,
it's a cattywampus stat, I believe.
Washington's front seven really didn't do anything like different. We've just seen back-to-back poor games from Brady and the Bucs offense, but overall, missing those two impactful players in Sweat and Young changes the game entirely. And more importantly, you could play Newton naked. Like, remember, 50% of his fantasy points literally came on the ground with his legs last year. And so you don't even need to find a stacking partner if you want to play him cheap and then build like around the Chiefs Cowboys games, because that's at least a starting unique way to get exposure towards Chiefs Cowboys.
What happened to Mr. Unlimited, Russ Wilson? Did he come back too soon? I don't know. We don't know how he's feeling. We're not privy to the medicals, but Daigle, he looked rough last week. I think it was the first time in his career Seattle's been shut out when he was under center, at least to start the game.
I mentioned what the Packers did defensively, but then also Russ didn't complete a single pass, 7 of them, 15 plus yards downfield. Now, was that inaccuracy issue due to his finger, or was it due to the defensive game plan by Joe Barry? I really don't know, but that's sort of the question we're asking if you're trying to jam in Russ. I do like Lockett in this game. We'll get to that when we get to receivers, but Russ, I genuinely don't have an opinion. Rich, do you have a thought on that?
No, I mean, it's probably just a combination of all the things everyone has talked about. This was rusty, came in. I mean, one thing that I've always been on, over the years is these guys that miss multiple weeks, they don't typically perform to their ceiling, when they come back to the lineup. So like one thing to always remember when these guys do miss time is that you're probably not going to get a ceiling performance, and it takes a while to get acclimated. Well, I'm curious too if anyone's pulled the data on the COVID guys too, for Rodgers too, like the guys that have had COVID, how they've responded. Because obviously COVID has impacted everyone differently. Some people have had it and been fine. Some people have been really sick. Obviously, we do talk about Myles Garrett when he had it last year. Said it impacted the whole rest of the season. These are still professional athletes. Like a guy like Nick Chubb who had COVID, it's got a great matchup versus the Lions, right? But what if he's not fully winded? We don't. Those are things we don't know. And because Rodgers didn't play good last week either, and he didn't practice and is coming off of the illness. So one thing to always just keep in mind that I always do question though is these guys that miss multiple weeks always come in with trepidation instead of optimism.
Tyreek Hill's 80 yards and 2 touchdowns spoiled us forever for players bouncing back from injury. We got spoiled off that one game.
I mean, it's one of those things. There always going to be stuff that happens. People are oh no, so it's always situationally. You have a guy like Tyreek Hill, you're never going to bench him. Quarterback's a little different because you might be able to stream, but also if it's a guy, it's just more of an expectation thing. Maybe just hey, yeah, playing football and practicing football is actually important to the game.
So I saw this name in chat. I took a peek over at chat, and this is DK specific again. So I'll ask you, Daigle, both sides of this game, I suppose. You're getting Tua at 5.5, and good Lord, Joe Flacco is starting at 4.6K. Dude. Why is it? He's 4.6. And it's in theory a good matchup, I suppose. Well, I don't know. You tell me, Daigle. Do we care to scrape the barrel on this? And it probably has to do with what develops throughout the week, but nobody wants to play Joe Flacco, but he's there at 4.6 and 2 is 5.5, and just he looked bad. He looked like he was his aim was just a small sample if you watch that game on Thursday. But that's my general guy on the couch takeaway.
They are running the Jets a different scheme, a quicker hitting scheme under Michael LaFleur. So it's not exactly Adam Gase's 11 personnel, but Flacco was in the situation last year against Miami's blitz heavy scheme. They are running the same defensive scheme as last year. And Flacco had 148 yards and a pick against the blitz. So not really a great situation for Flacco, but then again, what is a great situation for Flacco? So if you want to play chalk Myles Gaskin, if you want to get there this would be a more logical scenario than the last one you played, not you, Dean, but Universal you played in as a chalk situation, and he luck boxed into a touchdown. This would be the one, because not only can he get there via targets, also if we expect Joe Flacco to just get run over, Gaskin will be involved heavily. We've seen without Malcolm Brown, who is now out this game as well. Gaskin has handled 76% of Miami's backfield touches and 12 of 17 RB targets in that span. Now he's only had 8.5, 15.8, that touchdown game, and 5.5 fantasy points in those 3 games because he's been bad, because he is bad. But if he's going to get every single touch in this one against Joe Flacco, it is a favorable situation.
And he's getting the goal line work. Like, it's not like they're bringing Ahmed in inside the 5. Like, we haven't seen that. It's been him, which helps him out a lot. I wish he was a little cheaper on both sides because, like I said, Miami's just been genuinely bad running the football against everybody. So it's one of those things that it is tricky in that regard.
I wish he was more expensive, so I wasn't tempted to play him.
I mean, I like Tua. Some of the early builds I've built, like with Tua, have been like some of the teams I objectively like more, just because it opens up a lot more. Whereas, when I'm trying to build, Cowboys and Chiefs teams, I'm getting like a piece that I don't feel great about in the lineup. But yeah, Tua's one of these guys that does, I think, can unlock it because he's been pretty reliable in these spots. Like when we've needed to stream him in these matchups, he's been good. He got 20 points in the Jaguars. He had 27 points against the Falcons. The Jets are 32nd in passing EPA. It'd be one of these things that, you just worry about the game script, like if the Dolphins can. But like the Dolphins almost have to throw the short passing game because it's their running game. Like it's kind of the only thing they do. So, I mean, I imagine he will still have a lot of dropbacks, even if they do win kind of handedly, just because that's how they move the football. It's really the only thing they can do.
Let's move on, knock out some running backs. CMC, we saw he had a jump as far as snaps last week, looked really, really good. And truly, like, he could have been a lot better. Like, his fantasy score could have been a lot better if a couple things cracked his way. The DK price is still really appealing at 8.9K. FanDuel jacked him up to 10K, which is a little bit tougher to get to, obviously. But he's probably better played on DK just the way he, catches his 7, 8, 9, 10 balls. You get the full PPR there as well. Reeves, we have Swift versus Cleveland. Montgomery's got a reasonable price this week. James Conner, still a pretty solid price, 7.2 on FanDuel, 6.1 on DK. Who are your favorite running backs on a Wednesday night?
Yeah, we talked about, Zeke. You kind of hit on a couple of those guys. I mean, I do kind of like Conner. And I even like, Alex Collins and like in deeper large field stuff too, because he's so cheap and he's still getting so much of the work. We saw Rashad Penny not even get a touch last week. So it's basically just Collins and Homer. And if like Murray doesn't play, like this is a complete like flop flag spot for Seattle too. Like we talked about Russ, like them to just go face like Colt McCoy or Chris Trevler at home after getting shut out and like come back and like have like a decent performance could totally be, in the books. If Murray plays, obviously we'd like Connor a little bit more because it just saves you from the offense flatlining a little bit. We did get excited 2 weeks ago when they had all those points and Connor had all his points. Then you forget like, yeah, it's still Colt McCoy. Like this could really kind of just like the offense could just be completely stagnant and kind of, cripple everybody. And then Connor still got there with a touchdown because Hunter Henry and James Conner are allowed to score touchdowns every week. So, I mean, he still found the box, but yeah, I do kind of like Connor a little bit in tournaments. And then I do, like I said, like Alex Collins a little bit in that same game if the game script goes the other way, because he's one of those other like real cheap guys. And we know if they get inside the 5 and do hand it off, it will be Alex Collins. It won't be Travis Homer.
Daigle?
Yeah, James Conner was on my list as well. And I don't even disagree with Rich, but James Conner, Alex Collins skinny stacks are the true 2021 football season. That's what summarizes this year. If we get Alvin Kamara back, when he was last healthy, we did see Mark Ingram squeeze him for a season low in backfield touches backfield touch rate. But even so, Kamara against this vanilla cover one shell defense, it's just a great situation. The Eagles have allowed 5 passers this year to complete 80% of their passes. And most recently, Justin Herbert completed a career high 84% of his passes because all offenses do is just dump off against them. So it's a good situation for Kamara. I can't imagine anyone would play him in his game back. If we get Elijah Mitchell, even off of injury, it's just a finger. I would still expect him to lead in touches over Jeff Wilson. Like Jeff Wilson was just an early down guy. Mitchell even got the carry inside the 10-yard line and 27 carries. Like you're not worried about someone else stealing from that workload. And then you said DeAndre Swift. I'm going to say Nick Chubb if we get him back this week. Remember the last time we saw Nick Chubb it was that blowout against the Bengals, and Dearness Johnson got 8 carries, but 7 of those 8 carries came when the Browns were up 30 points in the fourth quarter. Like Dearness Johnson, that was Chubb's second game back from injured reserve, and Johnson wasn't involved at all. It was literally all Chubb. And so I do wonder if he just comes back as a bell cow in a sneaky spot.
The one thing that could happen to this slate, and it's Wednesday, is if Elijah Mitchell doesn't play, everyone's going to play Jeff Wilson to get to all those other guys that we talked about. That will be like what will happen.
Would you feel good about that? Like good about Wilson?
No,
like
but that's what would happen. No, I'm just saying that's exactly what's going to happen. Look at his price on both sides. They played on Monday night, so obviously he's grandfathered.
I mean, I would if Mitchell is ruled out, and I guess I lean still Mitchell's going to play, but if he's ruled out, like of course, like I'm eating that shot.
Yeah, he's going to be. I think he's
clearly it's an obvious situation.
Yeah, I mean he'll basically just be he'll be in Mitchell's role.
Yeah,
because Mitchell doesn't catch passes. Anyways, Mitchell hasn't even been targeted in 3 of his past 4 games. And with Hasty out, they just use Juszczyk as the guy again in like those situations.
Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, and then Deebo. Yeah, but Juszczyk's been like the third down back whenever Hasty's been out, and they didn't use Jeff. Like people thought like Jeff Wilson was going to come and like potentially get like that role, and we already saw like that they're not going to give him that role. But if Mitchell doesn't play, he'll be the guy that like he'll be. Because he's so cheap everywhere.
And 5K in FanDuel, 5-1 on DK, 14 on Yahoo. Go ahead.
Sexy. And we know like Trey Sermon's just a Dairy Queen or whatever he does during games. He's not there.
So I took a peek at chat and multiple people. Somebody says Dante Foreman, chalk week incoming. Somebody else, I love Foreman this week. What am I missing about Foreman? I understand they're facing the Texans. Is Foreman like a clear chalk play? Am I missing? It's 4.9 on DK. 6.2 on FanDuel?
6.2 on FanDuel, which is tough.
I can't talk to that, can I?
That's a tough price on FanDuel because at 6.2, like you need him to have the backfield, right? Like you need him to have the backfield, and he 21 snaps, Adrian Peterson 20 snaps, McNichols 16 snaps last week. They've all got a carry inside the 5 since Derrick Henry's been out. It's very tricky. Obviously, the Texans are bad against the run. Foreman's looked the best. But remember last week too, he was awful like running the ball. All his yards came on that reception. It's tough. 6.2 is a tough price to pay for Deontay Foreman.
Also, like the fact Foreman will be chalky, that's the easiest. I'm just not gonna play that chalk.
I'm just gonna play Arthur Juan in that game.
Yeah.
And just do that. That's what I'm gonna do in that game. Play Brandon Cooks and Arthur Juan minis.
I mean, it's just a premise, by the way. I'm not saying that Foreman's going to be chalk. This is according to the chat, and it's a Wednesday night.
But that's not the chat, who I love, by the way. Love you all. That's not the first time I've heard Foreman brought up this week.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's infatuated with like the revenge game with Deontay Foreman in particular. Adrian Peterson and Foreman have the exact same yards after contact right now. Like Foreman's made a couple bigger plays, but Peterson like is just fine. It's like whatever. And also like if Foreman gets you there, what's stopping them from plugging in Peterson on the goal line? Like for as much of a revenge game, which is not actionable at all, that everyone wants to talk about for Foreman, like Adrian Peterson is from the Woodlands. He's from the area. Is this a revenge game for him because he was born there? I don't know. Someone explain to me.
No, it's a homecoming game. There's 2 different kind of narratives.
Yeah. You got to separate that.
If you're playing,
I'm not on the narrative street. I don't understand narrative.
If you're playing rock, paper, scissors, I don't know.
It's whatever you want to be.
Which is which? Which is does rock?
I'm on the AJ Brown is not playing against Marshawn Lattimore narrative train. So.
Like Foreman should be. I mean, I guess they DK 4.9, whatever. It's still, but like 6.2. Like, how did we get to Deontay Foreman 6.2?
I mean, like, I'm not enthused about that. I understand how it can get there. I get
because like
that.
Gaskin is 6'2", and he's a guy that actually touches the football. Like at least there's like a reason to say like, all right, this is why he's priced there. Like, I mean, like Zach Moss is 5'8". Like, shouldn't he be priced around that? Like the Bills guys or like Devontae Freeman? Like, shouldn't he be in that price range?
Yeah, and there's McNichols there too. I don't know if we mentioned him. There's like 3 guys lurking. So. You know, it's a 3-headed backfield that none of the heads are terribly appealing as far as I can tell. But I do think they're probably talking DK where it's 4.9 as opposed to FanDuel where it's 6.2. But still. And
clearly everyone's high on him right now on a Wednesday because McNichols is in concussion protocol, but could still clear it by Saturday.
There you go. Anything else as far as running backs, or shall we move on and talk about some receivers? All right, Reeves, you want to talk about the Tennessee receivers, at least one specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in on Arthur Juan this week. I mean, a little blip last week. He just caught the 104 targets. He actually wasn't even shadowed in the game. It was just a weird game plan. And we've seen the Titans in the 2 games that they've now played without Derrick Henry. Ryan Tannehill has an average depth of target of just 4.9 yards. Only PJ Walker lower in that span. Prior was 8.3 yards. I think that probably has a little bit to do with some of the defenses that in some of the game script they've been in. I think we'll see some of that bounce back because you can't live that way. No offense can live that way. That's Jared Goff life. But we also seen, before last week, I mean, Arthur Juan was just ripping targets. Like he had 35% of the team targets over the previous 4 games. Like that's where I think we'll see him live largely in that 25 to 30% team target share weekly. Obviously gets a great matchup against the Texans. Then you can just run it back with Brandon Cooks. I mean, last time we saw Brandon Cooks, he had another 13 targets. He has 30% of team targets on the year. He's really the only guy they throw to. With Tyrod Taylor's thrown to him a team high 25 times. And even last week we saw with the Saints guys, like receivers are going to get there against the Titans. Like they're just going to continue to get there. So I do like that skinny as well.
John?
I already mentioned Tyler Lockett, second most air yards last week, only behind Stephon Diggs with a 20% target share. Matched DK Metcalf, but still, we want the downfield option in a bounce back spot. Just flop lag, like Rich mentioned earlier, with the Seahawks offense. So in on him. No, I mean, I don't know where everyone's going to come in on the Ravens offense, but, Marquise Brown still dominating targets. And I do expect Sammy Watkins' role to increase out of the bye as he's healthier. But Marquise Brown, just to leave us with a 30% target share, still pretty enticing since Watkins and Bateman were both active for that game prior. So Marquise Brown's really interesting. I can't imagine anyone will play him unless they get on Lamar Jackson. And then if you want some large field stuff, I mentioned Kez Watkins last week as well, but if Goddard's out, we saw the Eagles go to strictly 11 personnel, and Tyree Jackson and Jack Stoll are not Dallas Goedert. And the Eagles can only support 2 receivers. And although Devonta Smith's getting the usage, he will be up against Marshawn Lattimore most likely. And so it will likely be Kez Watkins at least filling in for those targets that Goddard leaves behind if you're playing Kamara or trying to skinny stack the Saints at all. And yeah, that's about it for me.
I love Hollywood Brown, man, because you're talking about a dude that gets that many targets with the types of targets he gets. Like it's like an insane cocktail, right? Like no player with a higher ADOT than Marquise Brown has more targets than him. Like, and it's just a cocktail to have crooked games.
It would help if we get a little pushback, but either way, we're in the same spot. Reeves, you mentioned with Justin Fields against the Bucs, that one instance where it's like everyone's going to play him because it's a bad defense. But then also you look up and he's poor against the blitz. And now here we are with Wink Martindale blitzing at the 4th highest rate. And so even if we don't get pushback, maybe it's just a game the Ravens roll the Bears over.
Brown was like 30% owned. Oh, go ahead.
Now to say this is a big field game. Like if he can hit in this spot, like against the defense, it's going to just blitz his face off. Then I think that he had turned the corner and he's going to kind of be usable the rest of the year.
The Padawan, yes, he's growing. Young Skywalker is learning.
It's good. I mean, that 4th quarter against the Steelers was hot, man. I know we're 2 weeks removed. It was hot. It was kind of one of those happy learns how to putt moments.
Do you think Fields is interesting for tournaments?
I don't, but
no.
I could see him get there. Like if it said this is the moment. I mean, because he's going to get his face. They're going to blitz every play, man. They're going to blitz half the snaps.
Brown, I was going to say DK a couple weeks ago, whenever he's in the main slate, he was like much cheaper, like $6K or so. It was like 30% owned in the Millie Maker. And yeah.
Well, remember any week that the quarterback is chalky, like Lamar was that week, like the top receiver is going to go along with that.
Yeah. People at this point are kind of sort of trained where you have to pair your running back with your quarterback with like the key receiver. Let's move on. Knock out some tight ends before we step aside and get out of here. We got George Kittle versus Jacksonville. Mike Gesicki, everyone's favorite Gesicki.
The first time ever George Kittle has scored a touchdown in back-to-back games.
Really?
First time ever.
I wouldn't have guessed that. I figured he would. Okay. Now he's got Jacksonville this week. TJ Hawkinson, who was a disaster last week, right? I don't know what he had, like 1 catch or 1 target or something like that in 5 quarters. He's got the Cleveland this week. Mark Andrews, and they're pairing for Lamar Jackson. And there's old reliable Dan Arnold. He's still kind of lurking, still kind of there. More of a DK play than a FanDuel play. What do you have for me, Reeves, as far as some of your favorite tight ends?
Yeah, we talked about, Kittle, like Andrews, if you're going to, play with Lamar. We talked about Kelsey. Listen, man, your boy Gesicki still had 7 targets. None of them didn't catch any of them, but I mean, he's just getting too much volume though to like completely like outright when these spots were like you like Tua, right? Like we like Tua, we inherently have to like the only 2 guys that can catch the football on the team, Mike Gesicki and Jalen Waddle. So like he kind of they get targets that so to speak. He's got 20% of team targets with Devontae Parker out. So like he's another guy that's not in play. We didn't talk about Uzoma in the game. Like he's another dude you could probably even throw a dart at in that stacking game, in that game as well. And then I don't know. We got anything else? I'm out of options here. We got too many guys hurt. Goddard's out. All the Washington guys are hurt.
Daigle?
The one, if you want a cheapie as well, Adam Troutman has seen at least 6 targets in every game that Trevor Siemian has played the last 3 weeks. He's at least getting the targets. It's not turning into production, but he's getting the targets.
I was checking out the Washington situation as far as their tight ends. We may get Thomas back this week. I want to see how his price. He's 3.9 on DK. And who knows, Ricky Seals-Jones at this point, are we sure if he's going to play or not? Who knows? But is that interesting and to any degree if Thomas is 3.9 and potentially Seals-Jones being out? If that scenario plays out, Daigle?
I don't know, because Thomas has been like fairly banged up at practices as well. I'm not sure he's a player. Like we already talked about playing guys off injuries. And it's a different scenario because it is a onesie spot with a cheap tight end we're trying to fill. I think I'd just rather pivot off elsewhere though.
Yeah, I guess
you don't want to play John Bates?
I'm not interested.
I don't know who that is. Is he on Washington? I never heard.
Hey, are you Boise State's finest, John Bates?
He's there. It's John Bates and what, Sammy Reyes, I think it is.
Listen, man, Jonathan Bates, the tight end, his dude was a 3-time All-State qualifier at Oregon State for track championships as a tight end. He's 6'5", 260 pounds. He's like a super athlete. Like those dudes are the siren call for like every fantasy gamer in all dynasty. We've all got a Jonathan Bates on our roster somewhere, whether it's Tyree Jackson or Doran Dickerson or like all those guys, Rob Hausler. The list goes on through the course of time. But John Bates, a super athlete from Boise State.
It seems like this is always the time of the year, the winter, Thanksgiving holidays, like the John Bates, the Jesper Horsteads, always just like pop up out of nowhere, and we end up playing them for like 2,500.
Did he win the mother effing Mackey? That's all Silva cares about. Probably not. I guess not. You
hell no. No one at Boise State's winning any awards.
We got anything else as far as the slate, or are we getting out of here?
That's about it for a Wednesday. I think we know where ownership, at least on a Wednesday, is going to be concentrated to. It's a matter of getting creative around AJ Dillon, Cowboys, and Chiefs, figuring out from there. But for the most part, I think we covered the slate.
Yeah, we set the table about as well as you can set it on a Wednesday night. Rich, tell the people. Go ahead.
And I mean, listen, the way it's gone this season, like Friday is just a whirlwind of news anyways. Yeah. Like every single Friday has been just an absolute nightmare. I can't remember another season where just like I've had to reshuffle rankings and projections on a Friday, just looking for all the official practice reports and the actual official injury news.
Silva will walk downstairs. He'll just like see the notifications on his phone and Twitter going off and then just walk back upstairs and go back to sleep. He's like, nope, not today. He's like, I'll figure it out later.
So if you're listening to this podcast on a Friday, you've wasted your time apparently, because everything we just said was completely worthless.
Our goal is to wet your chops, to parse your lips, to get you started with your thought, get it working, get some bench reps in, and then like you got to fill in the rest of the way without us.
Also, you can just go and you can read my thoughts on every player this week for free. Although the entire worksheet is free this week. Everything on Sharp Football site is free. It's free week over there. So if you want to see my thoughts on Deontay Foreman officially that we didn't touch on, or John Bates or whoever, you can check it out.
I will be checking that out. Anything else you want to tell them as far as the Twitter handle? Anything else you want to promote? By all means, let them know.
No, I don't want anyone to tweet me at this point of the season.
You don't want any start sit questions right now? But I'm 7-3, man. I'm going to make the playoffs, baby. We'll see. Depending on which guy you pick for me.
No tweets.
John, I want to start sit question. What do I tweet you for that?
Never. Just walk into hell and never come back. At Najee Daigle on Twitter if you really want to do that. There's no guarantee I answer. As I tell everyone, because they do slip in the start sets on like Tuesday. And I tell everyone, even the best possible answer, not only myself, but anyone gives you on a start sit on Wednesday is the worst possible answer because you're asking the question with the least possible amount of news. So just don't ask it. Like maybe slip in like an hour before kickoff. I've had a few drinks getting ready for the Thursday night game. I might be kind enough to be like, okay, now I'll rattle off some quick answers for you because I have the information in hand. But Tuesday and Wednesday, like we're just wasting each other's time. Let's not even do that. Let's just enjoy life. Let's remember that everyone is going to be injured by Friday, and let's just try to get through this thing together.
There you have it. Two of the absolute best in the business. John Hribar from Sharp Football Analysis. Check out his stuff. It's free this week. John Daigle, NBC Sports, a good football show podcast. I was Dean for Rotogrinders.com. This was the NFL Pick 6 Week 11 show. Good luck this week. We're out of here. Holler.